Welcome to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. Deep dives through the journey of youth sports, what parents experience, what coaches experience, and most importantly, what your kids experience. We'll also feature the latest information, tips, tools, and resources to help parents, coaches, and athletes navigate and improve the culture of youth sports. And now, the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, back to the 3A Athletics Workshop Podcast. I'm joined again by my partner, Seth Taylor, and looking forward to getting into our topic today. Episode number 11 is You and Your Team. Again, we talk about this whole experience, but how this integrates into a team, what makes a team great, culture, all the things that we hear about in the professional world of working in jobs and businesses. But let me ask you this. What is your favorite team of all time and why?
My favorite team of all time was a very small window. And this is going to sound funny because I played college soccer. I played high school basketball soccer at a decent level. My favorite team of all time was an indoor men's soccer team that I was on. We played together for 5 years, and we hit a window at one point where everybody was healthy. Everybody was in sync with each other for about almost a year. This is, when I was in my early 30s, where we were so in sync and we cared about each other so much, and everybody was kind of old enough to be over themselves, but young enough to still be able to run. And there was this fascinating thing that happened where everything flowed. And soccer is it's a poetic sport. You know what I mean? So it has this kind of chemistry thing that operates differently than some other sports. Like baseball is almost like this individual sport that's kind of wrapped up in a team context, but it became a poetry. And of course it was at our level, at the space that we were in, but it became poetry. It became this thing where it's hilarious, but there was love among the players. There was no arguments. There's no fights. There was no ego. Nobody get upset with refs. Nobody get upset with each other. We just played, and it was, and there was clearly, there was leaders. I was a leader on the team, and there was followers, but I'm telling you, it was the weirdest thing. There was a flow, a type of in syncness that it was a rare thing in my life in general. And I could probably talk for a long time how I think that happened, but it was like perfect balance.
Yeah, and I think back for me, Little League, we had a couple of successful teams, right? Winning state championships. And we talked about going to California in the Western regions and experiencing a panic attack with this group of friends that were my best friends, right? That we grew up playing in the cul-de-sac with and all that. And I think one thing, it was brought up to me by a close friend of mine who's a former Major League player. And he's like, your experience of playing youth sports was so much different than most people because you got to play with your friends from essentially 6, 7, 8, even some of them 3, 4, and 5 to a place now where you guys win your state championship at 18 years old with this decade plus of experience. Looking back on that, I think some of the big highlights for me were having some coaches that weren't our dads eventually entered the space in Little League and really created a mentality of fun around the work. And they had a batting cage in their backyard and we blast music and the mom would come out with cookies and the parents would just be hanging out at practice, not trying to coach their kids, but just because the energy, right? The collective energy was so positive. And we loved to work. And that's, 11, 12 years old as we really fell in love with that. And I look into my professional experience. I had so many great friends in Toronto that I came through the system with, kind of similar stuff, right? But then I ended up going and getting traded to the Pirates. And the culture of the team in Toronto was going through a transition from very old veteran team to very young, scrappy players that kind of came up playing together. It was a tough thing for me to get traded at that time because I loved those guys like brothers, right? We've been in the trenches of the minor leagues and grinded through spring trainings. And then I was removed from that and I entered the space in Pittsburgh where I knew really nobody, right? I played against guys, but you don't really know them. But the culture that they were creating there, right? And this is a team that had not won, hadn't had a winning season in over 20 years, similar to the Mariners a couple of years ago. And the focus there was the culture and being able to serve others, right? As the motivation over just your own self-interest, which is a difficult thing in sports, especially baseball, because as you said, it's an individual sport kind of wrapped up in this team concept. But once we were really able to kind of put our cards on the table, recognize and acknowledge that all of us had different career paths, different things we were dealing with, from organizational pressure to getting traded and having trauma, right, outside of sports, but to really just creating that brotherhood, right, or that sisterhood in sports, of everybody pulling the rope in the same direction. And I couldn't have come at a better time for me, and I couldn't be more grateful for that happening now looking back on it, because not only did we get a chance to break the non-winning streak of 20 plus years, and we got to play in the playoffs, and even though we didn't go to the World Series and ultimately win the championship, what I learned through that process, right, was how skewed my opinion or my view of leadership was. Mm-hmm. And how easy it is to get wrapped up in your own stuff, right? Yeah. And we talk about the ego being triggered and being stuck in your head. Being on a team where the collective energy is to help pull guys out of that, right? Because it's going to happen, especially over the course of 162 games in spring training. You got everybody from your superstar onto your 25th or 28th guy on the roster that's going through it at some point. Yeah. But having the collective energy focused on bringing guys back into the center, right? Yeah. Of not their own ego, but of the team collective energy. And I think that's, as we talk about it in our athletes journal, helping kids understand, like, what is your favorite team of all time, right? Asking them that question. Yeah. And then what is your least favorite team of all time? Yeah. And being able to differentiate the two things, right? And for parents listening, you probably worked in a work culture that wasn't great. Yeah. You probably worked in one that was really great, right? Or maybe it's a sports team that you played on in high school or college or at whatever level. Yeah. But I think it's important for us to all kind of take that step back, right? As parents, as we're entering whatever level of sports, right? How can we contribute to the greater good? Yeah. And I think that's something we want to instill in our kids, is not only how to be successful, whatever that means to you, but how to make the people around you better. Yeah. Right. So with that in mind, what do you feel like for kids that are kind of leaving that developmental stage and getting into more of the competitive team arena? Mm. How would you encourage parents to approach that conversation with their kids to find balance between being the best version of yourself for your own self-interest, right? Because we all have to have some kind of internal motivation for ourselves, but how do we plug that into the collective?
Yeah. Well, there's a really important question, and I do this with my kids, that when it comes to a team, you have to ask yourself the question, what does this team need from me? And there's an overall perspective. So I kind of have this thing where I'm constantly asking kids, hey, what if everything's happening in your life? And I think this is a healthy perspective. Like, what if everything in your life that's happening to you, including the teams you end up on, are actually here to teach you something? Right? Everything here is here to teach you something. And if you look at each team that you're on, that you end up on, and you ask the question, what does this team need from me? And what is this team trying to teach me about myself? Then you'll find that the context of a team is a place that shows you your weaknesses, shows you your strengths, invites you into certain spaces. Sometimes it invites you into spaces where you have to sacrifice some of your own good for the team. Yep. Sometimes it asks you to step up and become something that you've been scared to become. Yep. I've got a soccer player I'm working with right now that's like that a little bit. I keep asking him, like, what does this team need from you? What are they asking of you? Because he's in an academy setting, MLS Academy, which all these kids want to become pros, and they essentially are all competing with each other for a chance to get signed. So there's trying to bond as a team, but they actually are subconsciously, they're all trying to eat each other. Yep. And so I keep going, listen, man, this is a destructive way of you guys being with each other. But what if you ask yourself, what does this team need from me to be successful? Then it's going to show you your weaknesses, it's going to show your strengths. Anyway, it's interesting because he's been able to see really clearly, oh, this team is asking me to step up and be bold and be a leader and be a positive influence and to bring some light into the space. And it's drawing him into his best self. So every team needs that. I've had teams where I have this big, bold personality. I've had certain teams that you could see it, that the type of people I'm with and what the team was asking for was for me to quiet myself down and be more humble. And I've had teams that are asking me to be a greater leader. So the best thing to do is ask those two questions. What does this team need from me? And what is this team trying to show me about myself? Right. And that's the whole kind of thing, is that a lot of times players are like, I want to be the star, but a team is asking you to be humble in this space. And so I think those are the two questions to ask that are really important. And recognizing that this team is here, every individual can say, this team essentially came to me to help me with something. Yep. And what is that?
Yeah. And I want to shout out Clint Hurdle. He wrote the foreword for us on the baseball version of the Coach's Revolution. He was my manager in Pittsburgh. And Clint's been very public about his personal struggles and his personal development and how he's evolved, right, from being a number one overall pick on the cover of Sports Illustrated to now, managing in baseball for a number of years and still heavily involved in the game. And I'll never forget, he called me in his office and we were having this conversation. And he goes, what kind of leader do you want to be? I kind of like hesitated for a moment. He's like, here's what I see. You can be the clubhouse policeman, right? Which parents, we can relate to this. We want to police our kids and we want to coach them and give them all the structure and feedback. Or you want to be a leader. And I was like, wow. Because in the culture of professional baseball, it's very black and white. Rookies don't do this. Veterans get to do this. There was and I think the game's evolved for the better in that sense. But having to really like look inside of myself and say, okay, if I'm blowing up a young guy about not doing something the right way, the same way if a coach is just blowing up players because they make a mistake, instead of understanding how do you really reach that person? How do you meet them where they're at, right? To help them get to where they want to go. I think that's a concept that gets quickly lost, right, in youth sports and in college and professional sports, because again, you want to instill all these things, you want to teach people the right way to do things, but if you don't know how to connect with the person with where they're at, and you don't have the grace and humility yourself, right? We talk about this as parents. You got to do the work, right? If we're not doing the work and we're expecting our kids to be mentally healthy, right, and going through this whole experience of youth sports and life, right, it's very difficult to be that true leader. And that was something towards the end of my career I still struggled with at times, but I became so much more aware, especially as a veteran guy playing in AAA. I didn't want to be in AAA. I wanted to be in the big leagues. And some of these kids that I'm mentoring are 22, 23 years old, and I could see a lot of myself in them, right, and what they're experiencing and the pressure and just trying to figure out, okay, where do I fit in all this? And not really understanding at that age or at that stage of their careers what the path really looks like, right? Because they're not going to follow the same path as me, but there are these very obvious mistakes, right, that they're making. But if I just go up to the young kid and say, what are you thinking there? You know what I mean? And say like, hey, how you doing? And allowing them to kind of get to the space when we get to the deeper thing that's holding them back, really limiting that potential, that word we like to use. Being able to do that in the team setting is so crucial, right? And for parents, they're in the team space as parents, right? Being a leader amongst your group of parents, that's a responsibility not everybody wants to take on. But it's also, we have to learn to find ways to serve other people, right? And I think that's a huge message, right, that we want to hammer home. Is like acts of service is one of my love languages. If you're into that, right? That's something I do, but I also, in my marriage, for example, it's something that's constantly something I have to work on, is how I approach something that I don't agree with my wife, and vice versa, right? And I think we can all relate to that in our relationships, whether you're married or not, is like, am I able to control my controllables? Am I able to work on my stuff and recognize when it's actually my stuff that I need to work on, and not focusing on fixing somebody else's problems?
What does this team mean for me in any context?
So on the topic of chemistry, right? We've touched on it, but what do you think creates and defines good team chemistry on players you've coached and players that you work with?
It really is about it's about chemistry is a certain type of flow of energy. So if you think about it, I'm going to get into the physics for a second. Actually, well, you know what? I'll use this mug. I got a coffee mug here, a nice cool logo on it. And the mug is very solid, right? And it gives form to the coffee, right? And or the water or whatever's in here, right? It gives form to it. Chemistry is when that the spirit of a team, the emotions of the players, and their experiences, their trauma, is held really, really well. Right? That's where you see chemistry in a team, where each player feels held in that way. With little kids, it's pretty simple. You get guys, it's like, if you're a nice coach, and they feel safe, chemistry tends to develop pretty easily with young kids. So like, if they feel safe, if they feel loved, if they feel seen, chemistry develops. It's very easy for kids to do that. As adults, or as older kids, we get more and more complex, because the way we repress our trauma, the way our trauma starts to emerge around 13, 14, 15, our trauma starts to show up. If that is held well, it's the same kind of thing. Chemistry develops. In adult teams and in pro teams, same kind of thing. If it's held well, but of course now it's not being held as much by leaders as it is by individuals. But leadership still matters. A leader's job is to hold well what everyone's going through. Well, so I remember I was coaching a U17 team. These are 16-year-old boys, really talented group, one of the top teams in the state, soccer team. And I had all these kids. Well, I had a lot of kids with a lot of trauma. I had several kids that were undocumented here in the U.S. One of them, the dad had left when he was 3. They'd literally gone across a river and, had done the whole 9 yards. and he had serious abandonment issues. And I had another guy that had some serious trauma. Parents were alcoholics. I had all these kinds of, and what's interesting is that their ability to play with each other was very dependent on my ability as a leader to hold well their context, right? So a lot of chemistry is developed in that type of complexity. That's why leadership matters so much. But as they get older, you need your players to help lead each other as well. When in this context or this workshop with the parents, I mean, it's their job on that sideline to hold the complexity of not only what the kids are going through, but what the coaches are experiencing as somewhat, and then what each other, what happening. That team, that ability for that team to develop chemistry, those parents have to develop that same kind of chemistry.
Yeah.
You talked about that baseball team. It's really interesting because when you told that story about that your baseball team that was in the backyard at the thing and everybody's hanging out, the thing that blew me away the most is the fact that the parents are there and they're just enjoying each other, developing chemistry with each other, and holding that complexity. And maybe they're not fully aware of it because sometimes chemistry just happens. It's like this kind of magical thing that gets captured in a bottle. But if a guy like myself could analyze it properly, I'd probably see that like, yeah, they all are kind of holding each other without this hardcore judgment.
Yeah.
There's not too much structure, just enough to balance it well, like my coffee cup.
Yeah. And I think of that group, right, of the parents, how grateful I am because of the things that I experienced. I've talked about my mom was in a coma for 2 weeks, my freshman year of high school. And the group of parents that supported me, my sister, my family, and my mom through this process, it was like my extended family. Mm-hmm. And I'm famous for having 12 best friends, right, throughout my 20s. And I'm still good friends with a lot of these guys. But not having that community support, I never would have made it out, right? And there was good examples and bad examples of parenting and life choices that I ultimately have to grow older and make decisions and not make excuses for my behavior because I saw something. But I'm so grateful that I had 4 or 5 second moms or 4 or 5 second dads, or when things got tough for me, right, as I'm getting emotional talking about it, I had a place to go. And I had parents that were able to insulate me to a place where they continued to help me get to where I was trying to go, ultimately be a first round pick and a professional baseball player. Right. And there were parent egos that I remember one mom, was telling parents in the stands when I was 10 years old. I was 160, 150 pounds when I was 10 years old. I was a big kid, right? Mm-hmm. And that's part of why I advanced so quickly in sports. But she was so triggered that I played the same position as her son. And she was telling parents, just give it a couple of years. He's going to eat his way out of baseball. And it's like that. I'm 36 and I remember that as a 10-year-old like it was yesterday, right? Yeah. That's like that situation of maybe kind of the extreme parent that everybody kind of knows there's one of those parents is just bad mouthing the kids. Like, what are we doing? 30 something, 40 something years old. And we're talking negatively about the other kids on the team to make ourselves feel better. And that's an extreme example on the negative side, but getting back to the positive, right, is I remember these parents along the way, whether it was, financially helping me out, getting me on the team when my parents couldn't afford it, or just supporting us through the difficulties that we're going through as a family. Yeah. It's incredibly important. I'll go back to be where your feet are, right? It's like, understand where you're at in this process with your kid, whether they're 8 or they're 18 or somewhere in between. You have a real opportunity to be a role model for kids that are not your own kids, right? And to do that is by modeling your behavior, but also understanding how you can be there and hold the space for kids who might not have the home life that, you're providing for your child. Yeah. I just, again, thank you to all those parents, right, that were there to help me get through that, through those things as a kid. To really go out and achieve the things I was able to achieve in my career. And it's not just my parents that helped me do that, right? Yeah. We struggled with certain things, but the collective energy field that I think, put into for a purpose, right? There's a greater purpose working here. And that was something I look back on. I'm just like, man, I'm really lucky that I had that experience. And that's what we can provide, right, for that next generation of kids is healthier parents who are more aware of their own stuff, in control, and being that sturdy parent that is there to help them get through and be able to show them what real leadership looks like.
When you're tapping into something too, because I know during these podcasts we talk a lot about the issues in youth sports, the struggles, the problems. What you're hitting on now though is taps into what's great about it. That community, that team, that chemistry that can develop when people hold each other like that is everything that's beautiful about sports.
Well, I look forward to getting into that a little bit deeper. Yeah.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like Hero, an interactive guidebook taking parents of young athletes on a journey through their own experiences and perspectives, and how to approach the balance between being a loving parent and encouraging your child to push through challenges and excel in their endeavors. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.
Welcome back. Returning to our previous conversation, the beauty of sports.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a good teammate for your kids, and what does it mean to be a good teammate as a parent?
Yeah. It's to ask the two questions. It's to ask that question, what does this team need from me? And what is it trying to show me? And when we move with that type of humility, it allows for a type of bonding. There's an actual energetic thing to it. It creates a field of particles vibrating at the same frequency is essentially what we're talking about. When we humble ourselves in that way, everyone comes into sync. And when that happens, it creates community like what you're describing, like this really lasting community. But it also creates a type of energetic resonance that can amplify into something really beautiful. It becomes kind of a light. And probably all of us have had experiences like that. That's kind of what it is. And what we need to show our kids is how to do that. How do we walk into a space with humility and courage and then let confidence kind of come from that space? But, I'm literally thinking of, there's a handful of experiences I've had in my life of really hard, serious chemistry like that. And it was almost like all was right with the world when I'm in this space, this context. I remember being with this my senior year, right before this summer, before my senior year, my basketball team, before we had this kind of experience it blew up eventually because a couple guys left. But for about 3 or 4 months during the summer, all was right with everything. We'd step on the court in perfect harmony with each other, and everyone was able to move and really, really care about each other. So, but it was like, what is it? When I think back on it, I still remember, what did that team mean for me? And I gave it perfectly. For some reason, I was able to give that, and everybody was able to give what they needed in that team. There was a humility to it. There was a kindness to it. It's a really, really profound thing. That's why we do this. That is why kids love it. That's why when you ask kids, we've talked about how lots of kids are quitting, right? The reason they stay, if you ask kids why they keep playing, even though sometimes you can see that they're miserable, they don't like it, they hate it, they don't love the sport, they're frustrated. You ask them why they keep playing. What do they say? My team, my friends, my team, my connection. My daughter, she's a great athlete. The whole reason she's playing sports is because of her teammates. The only thing that matters to her. The only reason she came to me and said, "Dad, can I try some sports?" I said, "Yeah." So what made you want to do that? She just said, because of my friends. I want to play on their team. She's got this friend that's playing really high level soccer. She never played soccer before on a team. And she's like, I want to play with her. I'm like, well, she's playing at one of the best teams in the entire state. She goes, no, I want to play with her. Okay, well, if you want to get to where she is, the whole motivation is that team bonding, that confidence, that connection. She's playing on a volleyball team now already. She's just like hugging all her teammates and they're loving each other. That's why we do this.
Yeah. It makes me think back to, like I talked about, the culmination of these little league experiences and the summer ball teams that we played for. And although there was a core group that was together for all of that, we also had guys that went and played for different summer teams for various reasons, right? And as we all kind of came back to high school baseball, we had to enter that space where I was a leader on that team and the best player. I'll just say that from a non-egoic standpoint. Mm-hmm. But recognizing what my job is to get everybody pulling the rope in the same direction, and for all of us to be able to check the ego out the door and say, okay, I could probably, and I'm speaking for other guys in the team, I could probably be the 3, 4, 5 hitter, one of the best players on most of these high school teams that they're playing against. But on this team, I'm the 8th, 9th, 10th best player on the team. My role is a designated hitter. My role is I'm not playing every day, but for my teammates, for the greater good, something bigger than myself, I'm going to buy into this, right? And what we ended up doing was going 26-0, won the state championship. It was like the perfect storybook ending to this perfect storybook experience of youth sports. Now, we've talked at length about what's not perfect about it, right? Yeah. But I think I didn't have to face those same experiences in high school that a lot of kids had to go through. And I think that's where this becomes such an important concept that we're teaching our kids, because I didn't experience that, it became more challenging for me down the road. When eventually I went from being the first round pick, the number one prospect, the golden boy, right, the franchise player, all these things that were being said about me, that my ego and the narrative was just really starting to build. And then I get traded. And now I'm playing on a team where, as a guy I got traded for, I got a lot of opportunities, right? More than just the average person coming through the organization. But I also had to learn how to embrace different roles. And I think for me, my favorite team of all time was 2014. We had gone to the playoffs in 2013. At the time, I was the opening day starter on both of those teams, right? And in 13, I had played myself out of the lineup, was a bench guy, ended up having a foot surgery and kind of revamping, coming back into 2014. Like, how can I be a guy, right? And again, opening day starter, this is the year, I'm going to go out and do it. And I struggled. And about halfway through the season, I was relegated to a bench role. And during that time, again, Clint Hurdle, another shout out to him and the coaching staff in Pittsburgh at the time, really found a way to help me focus on what does the team need from me, right? And at that point, they needed a left-handed bat coming off the bench to have an impact at some point when the pitcher in the National League at this time is coming out of the game, or a matchup where we want a left-handed bat. And it was really difficult for my ego, right? Because my ego was triggered. There was all these narratives, there was all this expectation that I'm going to be a 10-year, $100 million Hall of Fame kind of player. And now I'm the 25th guy on the roster. I ended up pitching in a game that year and got to strike out a pretty prominent name guy, NL MVP, Joey Votto, no big deal, right? But
You struck out with Joey Votto?
I did, yeah.
You told me that.
You can YouTube it. It's real. But at that point, like, if you're pitching in the game, you're not the most important guy on the team, right? And I banged the desk to get that opportunity, just because I knew in that role I could go clean up an inning. It'd be a really cool experience for me, but this is what the team needed from me, right? And during that time, I really focused on, okay, how do I become the best pinch hitter? And we had great coaches there that really simplified the process for me, right? Which I didn't have to do this in high school. I didn't have to do this at any point in my career. I was doing this at 25, 26 years old. And they simplified that process, and me and the rest of the guys on the bench, we talk about that collective energy. Not one of us wanted to be a bench player. But we understood that was our role at that time in the season, and it's a long season in baseball. So I got to embrace this. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of here. And fortunately, I was able to find a simplified process, and I was convicted in that process and went out and was leading the league in pinch hits at one point, right? After being up as an opening day starter to not being a guy who's really getting used to the games. And then our best player goes down, Andrew McCutchen. And now all of a sudden we have this super prospect, Gregory Polanco's up there, and they've shipped to the outfield, and guess who's in the lineup every day? Me, right? And I think the big takeaway for me is I could have sat there for those 2 months, and for a period of time I did. I felt sorry for myself. I made excuses. I blamed other people because I was only concerned about myself. But the collective energy of that group and the coaching staff pulled me back out of it and said, hey, no, you got a lot more to contribute here. Might not be right now, but at some point you're going to have an impact on this team. You're going to have an impact on this season. And you got to start thinking about it. And when that light bulb went on for me, that's when the pinch hitting really started to become, I took a lot of pride in it, had success doing it. Our bench was one of the best benches in all of baseball that year. And then when that injury happened, I was ready to go, right? Because I wasn't just sitting there sulking in my own negative energy. I was committed to the team. And then I get an opportunity to play pretty much every day down the stretch. And, McCutchen comes back and I'm still in the lineup, right? So at that point, I had earned my way back into it. I had shown the grit, right, that everybody's talking about. Even though I didn't have that foundation from youth baseball to really build off it, I was lucky to have those people around me to really help guide me through it, take advantage of the opportunity, and then get a chance to go out and be the starting right fielder in the wild card game. Again, we faced Madison Bumgarner. He shoves. We end up getting knocked out. We don't advance past the wild card game. But to me, seeing how the buy-in, right, to the greater good that we talk about, what made that team great and those teams during that time great, is the ability to put our egos to the side, become aware of what are the triggers and the things we talk about, but really then be able to focus on what does this team need from me right now?
Yeah.
And with the understanding that doesn't mean you have to strive to be a pinch hitter the rest of your career. That might be your role, right?
Yeah.
But at that point in time, I have to embrace this with everything I got and go out there. And it turns out to be one of the most influential seasons of my career. And again, I lasted one more year in the major leagues and then spent the rest of the time in the minor leagues. But it gave me that perspective to then be able to mentor players, right? And become the leader that Flint Hurdle was talking about at that point in time is, do you want to crush people or do you want to build people up, right? Simply put. And I think for all of us listening here is, how do we add value to the team, the collective? As parents, how do we add value to the lives of these kids, right? Because that's really what this is about. Not every kid's going to get to play at the next level.
Yeah.
And that's not what it's about. It's about developing healthy, happy human beings who are going to be able to go out in the world and withstand the challenges that we face.
Yeah. Yeah. My hope is that my kids have an experience like you have with that team where you guys are all still friends.
Yeah.
I mean, that is remarkable because no matter what level they get to, that lasts.
Yeah.
You guys can be friends till you die.
Well, and we all got kids, right? And we're entering the space as parents. And that's, again, as great as our experience was, we still have to be able to look at that and say, okay, there was a lot of great here.
Yeah.
And it gives us all the warm, fuzzy feelings. But then I know each one of us individually has those traumatic experiences and those things that we're bringing into it, that if we're not willing to do the work on ourselves, our kids are going to suffer. And some of us had bad experiences with coaches. Some of us had good experiences. Well, we got to work through those things to then be able to show our kids how to overcome those situations, like I mentioned with pinch hitting or having a coach that you don't connect with. All right, we'll wrap that up.
Yeah.
Looking forward to number 12, being a pro. How to be a pro.
You're gonna have to carry that one a bit. I know some things, but I've never been a pro. So
You've worked with a few, and like to being one. So I look forward to going back and forth. Thank you guys for joining us.
At whatever level your kids participate in youth sports, you and your kids will benefit greatly from the resources 3A Athletics has carefully created to protect the foundation of your child's identity and your relationship. At the same time, these resources can help you unlock your child's true potential in sports and in life. The sooner you get started, the more successful your kid can be. Resources like 3A Sports Journals. Many athletes don't journal because they simply don't know how it can be helpful to their process. Elite athletes around the world use journaling from an early age to help them face the tough challenges of sports. If your kids want to go from good to great, they need to learn how to journal. 3A Athletics. Awareness, activation, achievement. From good to great. See us at 3athletics.com.